Was there ever any doubt what the last game of this series would be? No, really, did anyone think anything other than The Last of Us would be the final game in the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series? Shit, even the YouTube order knew the shit was coming, and that's in between sessions of having to go fuck himself. Oh man, I can't believe it's finally here. The light at the end of this long-ass tunnel that I went through with the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series, and I will talk about that at the end of this video because there is tons to say about The Last of Us. First of all, gameplay in the background is going to be very light on actual gameplay. Yes, the game has fantastic combat, but the pinnacle of this story is the journey the game takes you on. Those who played the game know the significance of the scenery and the setting you're seeing in the background, and it's scenes like this that made this game so unbelievably perfect. Now, honestly, throw all the gameplay out of the window for a second, and this is the crowning achievement of storytelling by far. If you were to ask me before this game came out, what game has the best story to draw you into the game, there would only be a handful of games on that list. BioShock, Grand Theft Auto 4, Uncharted 2, Metal Gear 4, and Mass Effect 2. That's really it. That would be my list of games with complete stories. And I even said in a question and answer session that BioShock is the game with the best story out of any game that I had played. However, I said that before The Last of Us was ever created. This game earned well over 200 Game of the Year awards, and this motherfucker earned every single one of them. In a year that saw BioShock Infinite and Grand Theft Auto 5, this game still managed to top two amazing franchises that have been well established with video gamers already. This game is that good. And me personally, I would say it's the best campaign to date on the PlayStation 3 console. If I had to vote what was the best game on PlayStation 3, this is my choice. It's quite possibly one of the greatest games ever made from all ends. And the talent of Naughty Dog put together a campaign that nobody can match. Combined with the ridiculous graphics, the perfect voice acting, this game outperforms even some of the greatest achievements on the console, Uncharted 2 and Metal Gear 4. The amazing thing is that this is a genre that's been played out to death, no pun intended. Zombies are taking over the world and all of humanity is lost up in this motherfucker. Except for Joel and Ellie, who go on this amazing adventure that's part survival and part humanity's last hope. Now the story hits you right from the beginning. The prologue of the game is more than enough to draw people in. You can see what's coming, but you can tell something bad's about to happen. Yet when it actually does happen, the writing, the voice acting, just make it so believable. I mean, just from the prologue alone, you can tell that this game is going to have some amazing shit. And I want to avoid as many spoilers as possible because there's still plenty of people out there that have a chance to go buy the sucker on PlayStation 3 or the remastered version on PlayStation 4. After the prologue, the story just keeps hitting high note after high note after high note. Between Ellie's reveal that she's infected and somehow immune to the virus, Tess realizing the inevitable, to the decision that Henry has to make and his guilt over it, to Joel protecting Ellie while growing fond of her, Joel getting injured, Ellie taking care of him, Ellie's run-in with Dave, and then the finale of the game that was built up to all the way from the beginning. This is exceptional storytelling. This is how you write excellent scripts and ideas and watch it carried out by perfect voice acting. As you progress in the game, you see how well they developed the relationship between the two main characters. Essentially, Joel starts to look over Ellie as a daughter instead of just a payday. Instead of just delivering her with doubts that her immunity will save people from the virus, he looks at her as his personal responsibility for her safety. You encounter crazy shit, one after another, from zombie infestations and tunnels to desperate human beings trying to survive, all willing to kill you in the process, to cannibals that Ellie must protect Joel from, and finally, Joel not being able to let Ellie go through with the surgery, and a perfectly satisfying ending that leaves the door open to player interpretation. Now, I know some critics didn't like the ending too much, but realistically, what would any father do if they were put in that position? That's essentially the decision the game comes down to, and I bet a number of dads would have done the same fucking thing for their daughter, and it highlights just how far their relationship had come from the beginning of the game, and just how realistic this game actually portrays the situation. I thought the ending fit perfectly. Much like the endings of other great games, this was a fitting ending for a perfect game. It wasn't meant to tie up every single loose end and save the world, because after all, how trivial would that have made everything before this? All the storytelling in the prior 10 to 15 hours if Joel just gave in and accepted the ending. No, of course not. All that storytelling would have went right out the window had he just acquiesced to what they wanted to do to Ellie. Now, there's no denying the game is essentially a zombie game or a survival game, depending on how you view this motherfucker. It's nothing new that we haven't seen. It's nothing we haven't done before. However, it's the best damn survival game or the best damn zombie game that's ever been created. Mainly because the storyline makes this more than just your ordinary zombie game. I mean, let's face it, without shooting zombies in the face, this would just be an amazing movie to watch. But as a genre, it's classified as a zombie game. But to me, this is unlike any other zombie game or infestation game ever created. This isn't Resident Evil or Left 4 Dead. This isn't Resistance. It's a well-written story that just happens to have some zombies in the motherfucker. It's a story first and a zombie game second. All the other games focused on their action first, and then they try to wrap the story around how the fuck do we survive all these zombies. That's what separated this game from its competition. You don't have to be the first at making a zombie game. You just have to be the best ones at making it. And that's what Naughty Dog did with The Last of Us. They didn't just go out and make a story of zombies. They made a story of survival between two people that ended up having zombies in the game. Without question, if you own a PlayStation 3 and you wanted to find a great campaign, this is it. Hell, if you own a PlayStation 4, you didn't get a chance to play it on PlayStation 3. They have the remastered version of the game, and that's probably the best game out right now on PlayStation 4 as well. It's that damn good. The game is so good, in fact, that there are no major flaws. There are only little issues with the game that would be nitpicking, to say the least. Sure, you can say there's no variety in the zombies since there are only a couple of types, or that the human enemies don't gang up on Joel as you expect him to, and Joel kills people far too easily, but those shits are trivial issues. And speaking of trivial issues, you almost have to mention the one review that asshole gave this game when it released a year ago. I'm not going to say it by name, not going to say the company, but this dickhead gave it a 7.5, and personally, I really don't give two shits about a score. To me, the score did seem pretty low, but he's entitled to his ignorant opinion and score. I don't really give a shit. The problem with his review is that he needed to look for the tiniest shit. Things like, how come aiming is so difficult? Meanwhile, there's an ability to improve your aim in the fucking game. And not for nothing, but most games just make it so damn easy to point and shoot and kill a motherfucker. So it was a nice change of pace to make it more difficult to shoot enemies in an actual survival game. He complained about moving from one fight to another. Well, exactly what kind of action were you expecting from an infected world of zombies? Shit, you can sneak by him if you want, and if you were careful enough. He basically gave the game a lower score because he's shitty at shooting games. That's it. He praised all the story elements of the game, the same exact elements that every other reviewer praised, but he focused on his shitty video gaming skills as the reason he didn't like the game. If there was ever an idiot who should not be giving game reviews, it would have to be that asshole. Now, I'm not going to get into this whole spiel about video game reviews and shit like that, because I could spend an hour alone just on how video game reviews should be done. And actually, I wanted to do a video on that a long time ago, but I never got around to it. But this asshole focused on what he personally couldn't do compared to how the game functions. There's always a difference between how much you like a game compared to how well it was created. That dickhead couldn't differentiate between the two. He was given the task of representing a company, not a blog, not his own property, but a company that pays him, and because he's a shitty player at games, he gave The Last of Us a 7.5. You know, it's one thing if you have legitimate complaints about the game, if you have legitimate complaints about the architecture, the design, fine, no problem, we're all entitled to that part of our opinion. But to say aiming is hard is the reason why you only give an average score shows he's a fucking idiot, especially considering they had perks in the game to improve your fucking aim. Granted, this motherfucker is certainly entitled to his opinion, and the rest of the world is entitled to theirs about what an incompetent cocksucker he is. But regardless of what one asshole thinks, the game didn't win all of those Game of the Year awards for nothing. Even its multiplayer portion of the game received some praise, although I didn't play it at all, but those who played it said it was something different. It's not Call of Duty or Battlefield, and it certainly doesn't have the same amount of players as the big shooter games online, but it certainly worked better than Grand Theft Auto 5 Online now, didn't it? Look, it wasn't as ambitious as Grand Theft Auto 5, we know that, but they attempted something a little bit different from the usual online shooter, and it worked out pretty well for them. It's not an online portion that are going to make people go out and buy this game just to play it, but for being a functioning product on an amazing campaign, and it at least avoided the letdown of having a game focus solely on one portion of the game, it shows that Naughty Dog put some effort into this. You know, it's not like Call of Duty or Battlefield that make awful campaigns. They went for functionality over blockbuster multiplayer, and the fact is the players who played it will tell you any day of the week it was a quality built section of the game. Is it perfect? Far from it. But did it work? Absolutely. At the end of the day, Naughty Dog released 4 Game of the Year contenders on PlayStation 3. Not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 Game of the Year contenders, with at least 2 of them probably ranking in the top 10, and shit, probably the top 5 when it comes to most gamers when they rate the quality of a game. After each Naughty Dog game, the question is always, how do you top that? How in the world do you beat what you just created. Uncharted 2 blew away Uncharted 1 in terms of quality. Uncharted 3 came along and was a better technical game. Story wasn't as good as Uncharted 2, but it was still an amazing game. Now you have The Last of Us. How the fuck do you top this? Shit, with Naughty Dog's track record, Uncharted 4 is scheduled to be the greatest game of all time at this rate. Now, being the last game in the series, I also get a chance to look back on my console this generation as the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series has now come to a close. I remember when the PlayStation 3 was released years ago, the one word that people kept using to describe it was potential. Imagine the potential of the console when all the features are rolled out. Imagine the games when studios are able to harness the power of the console and the cell processor in its entirety. For 7 years, the console was sold based on the promise of potential, and as you've seen across the sum of 55 videos, the majority of these games are ports. Some of them are bad ports, and the only games that really didn't have issues were obviously the Sony-owned studios. But in all that talk of the potential of the console and how great it was supposed to be, it took almost its entire life cycle to find its one true masterpiece. You know, The Last of Us is the result of all the potential that was bragged about for all these years. Don't get me wrong, there were other great games, and I detailed plenty of them over the course of these 55 videos, but this is the game that really harnessed the power of the console in its entirety. The graphics are unbelievable, the sound quality is perfectly top-notch, and when you combine that with a great story, this is the result of all that potential for years that Sony touted. Unfortunately, I don't think the PlayStation 3 console ever reached its true potential. I mean, I love my PlayStation 3, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the shit out of my PlayStation 3 Fat to play some of those old PlayStation 2 games, and my PlayStation 3 Slim lasted me from Modern Warfare 2 all the way up until now. So there's no question I'm thoroughly satisfied with my purchase. But the unfortunate reality and probable legacy of the console is that it was too difficult to program for. You know, because Xbox was easier to program for and PlayStation 3 was a bitch to work on, the overwhelming majority of games were ports. And there's just no way around that. Some of them were good ports, like some of the later Assassin's Creed games where you saw no difference. Others were truly awful ports like Fallout or Black Ops. But there were very few games that were actually developed for PlayStation 3 and then ported over to Xbox. Final Fantasy 13 is the only one that comes to my mind right now. Overall, I think Sony made the mistake of underestimating Microsoft and Xbox this time around. They created a powerful machine, but it was a bitch to program for, and the result was cross-platforming games being inferior on the console, and they relied on their own studios to heavily carry their sales figures. The Last of Us showed how amazing their games could be, but outside of Naughty Dog games, the consoles just never lived up to the initial hype. You know, Sony Santa Monica, Guerrilla, Media Molecule, they all had great games. They all put out amazing products worthy of the praise, but at the same time, none of the technical portions of their games made the PlayStation 3 feel like it had all that potential they were selling us on. Naughty Dog was pretty much the only studio that managed to squeeze every fuck nugget of power out that sumbitch, and the result is the amazing games that they put out over these 6 past years. Personally, as much as I would say the PlayStation 3 was a success for Sony, it also had a lot of pitfalls just based on the fact that they tried to make something way too powerful and way too complex for developers to actually use. Now, in closing, I have to say that I also underestimated just how much work the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series is going to be. No, really, man, I can't lie. When I thought about this series months ago, it sounded like a good idea. Play each game one last time before heading over to PlayStation 4. Give each game a chance to enter the console one last time and having my viewers see what my library looked like for the past 7 or 8 years. I mean, after all, the only other choice was to have ghost videos all summer long, and who the fuck wants to see all that? I mean, what was I going to have? Me getting stuck on shitty teams or beating the fuck out of Christmas news and free-for-all? That's all was really going to be left. So much like last year with the Blueprint series, I figured a summer project would hold me over for quite a while until the next game came out that kept me entertained. But motherfucker, man, this was a shitload of work. You know, I initially wrote out the list of weeks in which the games would be posted, but what I didn't do was see how that schedule would impact all the other videos that I had planned on doing. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the shit out of this, but I just wish I had started a little bit early in the year to make sure I had enough time to finish this shit. You guys saw at the end of the series, basically, I was putting out week after week of Goodbye PlayStation 3 videos, mixed in with some other specialty videos and footage from other games and whatnot. But this 7-day posting cycle schedule, oh man, this shit was a bitch to keep up with because I'm not a video game making factory like other channels. I like to take my breaks and shit like that. I'm glad I did all the videos and I felt like I gave them all their due, but man, I am glad this shit is over. What sounded like a good idea on paper turned into a project and a half and actually doing the motherfucker. But now that the series is over and Destiny will be coming out on Tuesday, I can finally go back to my original schedule after all these months. No more 7 videos a week, no more outrageous schedule just posting on videos. I will be going back to 3 videos a week starting on Monday. I mean, this weekend I still have 2 more Ghost videos to go, but as for my collection of video games, the Goodbye PlayStation 3 series is now complete. I started with Resistance Fallen Man, the highest rated release game on PlayStation 3 all those years ago, and I finished with The Last of Us, probably the best game ever released on the console, and managed to put 53 other games in between those. My PlayStation 3 served its purpose all these years. It kept me entertained and provided a shitload of content for my channel to keep you guys entertained, and hopefully my PlayStation 4 will be able to do the same. So for the final time in this series, as always, rate, comment, subscribe, and all that good shit. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the series as much as I enjoyed playing all these games for one last time.